Hey there, welcome back to our channel. It's Billy and Yolanda Jackson with Live in Peace Marriage. We are so glad you're here and so glad you tuned in today. Be sure to like and subscribe if you really enjoy what we're talking about today. And I think you will, so stay tuned.
So today we're going to talk about something that causes communication breakdowns. And what is that, sweetheart?
It's called deflecting. Have you ever experienced that in your marriage? Well, what are we talking about? What is deflecting? Can you define it for the people?
Yes, I can. It says to deflect means to bend or turn aside, to turn from a true course or straight line, to swerve.
Is that what you just did to actually get the definition?
Hey, listen, it happens all the time. And listen, Yolanda and I, we love y'all so much and we're here to help everybody. But I got to tell you, this type of thing happens even to us today.
Yes.
And you got to look out for it.
Yeah, and I try to catch either one of us if we find ourselves deflecting.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen because it's almost like a defense mechanism.
Yes.
You know, when your defenses go up, then you start deflecting on what you're really trying to say in a conversation.
It also happens when you hold back things that you should have talked about already.
That's right.
Things that are important that you want to bring up, but you're like, I don't want to fight about it. I don't want to argue about it, so we won't talk about it. When those things get built up, it fuels the confrontation of deflecting. So for an example, let me just share with you. Let's say I'm doing something that, that Yolanda had already talked to me about. She says, hey, you shouldn't. And then because I have been aggravated by Yolanda about some things, I don't bring it up then. But because she says something to me, I say, hey, well, you do this.
Exactly.
And that's called deflecting. When I should have had my conversation with Yolanda a long time ago if I had an issue with something.
Absolutely.
And that's what we don't do as couples. We always let things go. I know I do. I always let things go and I don't want to talk about it at the time. I'm getting better with it. But these are the things that we're talking about.
Well, and what I typically say is, we ain't talking about me right now.
Exactly.
And that's not the best way to respond as well.
Right.
So if you would write down these few tips, so the next time you find yourself deflecting or your spouse deflecting, then you all can discuss some strategies to prevent this from happening.
Think about it. Strategies. These are things to work on. It's not going to happen overnight.
That's right.
But take these tips and work on them.
Okay, so the first tip, write this down, is recognize the pattern of deflecting. When you're having a conversation, do you typically blame your spouse for the same action that you are giving maybe constructive feedback about? Or do you try to minimize the issue, like it ain't a big deal, kind of passive aggressive situation? Or do you try to shift the focus on your spouse and then you look up the conversation is about something that it didn't even start with, right? So for instance, if I'm having a conversation with Billy and he says, well, you do that, you always do that, or you do that often, or, I find yourself doing that as well. Well, that's not how the conversation started. It started with me giving you feedback on what I was observing. And when I observe it, this is what I see. And instead of him switching the focus to me or minimizing the issue or blaming the issue, which is deflecting, you want to try to get back to the core of the conversation.
One of the reasons for recognizing this is because you can only deal with one topic at a time.
Yes.
There's no need of, if Yolanda brings an issue or something that we need to talk about, there's no need for me to bring up 3 or 4 things.
That's right.
To throw into the pot, because we can only work on one thing at a time. And the recognition needs to be not only from the giving side, but also from the receiving side. I have to learn to understand that I'm saying, well, wait a minute.
Yep.
I'm not supposed to do that. Both parties need to recognize when these things come up.
And actually, that's the next tip. So the second tip is self-awareness. That's what Billy just shared with you. You have to be self-aware. So when you find yourself, but you stop yourself, take a deep breath, receive what your spouse is actually saying, and try to listen to understand what they are saying versus pushing on them to be understood.
Right.
So listen to understand. And don't bring up them, even if you've seen it in the past, even if they did it yesterday. It doesn't matter, right? Listen to understand.
So the next tip is a little hard. And I say that because it's been hard for me.
Okay.
But now you have to take responsibility.
Yes.
In the act of me saying, well, and a lot of times now, Yolanda will just pause. She won't continue to say anything. And then I get it. I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that. This is the time you take responsibility and you say something like, even if it's uncomfortable saying, you have to say, you know what? I got it. I shouldn't have said that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then knowing your mind, okay, if it means that much to me, we'll talk about it later.
That's right.
Okay. But we have to talk about what she wants to talk about now because she's got the floor.
That's right.
Whoever comes in and has the floor has the floor. And we got to recognize that. Recognize the issue, know it yourself, and even if you feel uncomfortable about it, it's okay. Remember, you're just trying to make it. You're trying to change. You're trying to transform. You're trying to make conversation better. So it's going to be some uncomfortable stages when you begin this thing. But once you start doing it, you'll start understanding. And now I get to the point where I catch myself. When she says something, I'm like, well, okay. You know, you go ahead with the conversation.
I love the fact where you said take responsibility and for whoever has the floor. Mm-hmm. So if you take responsibility, then the next step is for you to understand, respect the floor. Yeah. So if that person is coming to you with the situation, then the best thing to do as a unit is to respect the floor, respect the person that's speaking on the floor, but take responsibility of your place on the floor.
That's right.
So I thought that was good. Did y'all write that down? Y'all got to get that. So respect the floor, but also take responsibility of your place on the floor. So I love that tip.
Remember, it's the two of you all. You are CEOs of your family. Mm-hmm. You are CEOs of your marriage. Mm-hmm. And if there's a conversation that needs to take place, then have a conversation with the items brought up at the time.
Right.
The question on the floor, mm-hmm. as you may say. You know. Right. And then once you address that, if that means so much to me, we'll talk about it later.
That's right.
One more thing I want to add to what we just talked about. When I adjust and I recognize that I need, and say, hey, it's my fault, my bad. Now I don't need to think about all this stuff I want to say. I need to clear out all that stuff in my head because, again, like I said, Yolanda has the floor in this example that we're giving.
Yes.
So what I need to do is clear all of that out. We'll talk about it later. And I need to listen actively.
That's right.
Okay. I need to listen to what she's saying. I don't need to be thinking about what I want to say while she's talking to me because it's not my time yet. It's not my time to present my case. Okay. Right. And we got to understand that this is working together. Okay. So listen actively.
And the Bible teaches us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Yeah. So practice that as in your marriage, and that will help you to listen more actively. Yeah. The next tip we want to share with you is stay on topic. Don't try to switch the topic because you're tired of hearing what they're saying or you don't want to hear what they're saying. Yeah. Stay on topic until your spouse has flushed out whatever it is they're going through. Now, here's one thing that Billy does to me sometimes, though. So if I'm bringing something to the floor, I'm just using your illustration again. If I'm bringing it to the floor and it's something that I'm giving him constructive criticism about to shift or adjust to, and he's listening to what I'm saying, then I need to say what I'm saying and then let it go. Don't keep repeating it. Don't try to find 5 different ways to say it over and over again unless he does not understand what you are saying. I have a bad tendency sometimes to just say it over and over and over. And Billy sometimes has to say, I heard you the first time. Right? I get what you're saying. I heard you the first time. Once they acknowledge that they understand what you're saying, move on. Don't keep beating the dead horse, as they say, or don't keep just talking about it over and over and over again, because what that's doing is you're only doing it for your own selfish self.
Okay.
You're doing it so that you will feel better. Yeah. Right? Instead of saying what you got to say and move on from it.
And let me add to that. If and when I do say you said that before, it is after I have allowed Yolanda to keep saying it over and over. See, sometimes we have to allow our spouses to repeat it.
So you saying you give me some grace?
You have to, because a lot of arguments start with those words. You said that already.
Yeah, true.
And it's the tone also. So when I do say that to Yolanda, it's not a bad tone, and it's after. It's at a time, if I say, I know you said that already, sweetheart. It's a time when she'll recognize she has said it over and over. Okay, so we have to allow grace. We have to allow for it to happen. But you don't want to get redundant. And the only reason why I stop my wife after a certain point is because you don't want each other to continue to speak negativity.
That's right.
Okay, that's just bad interruption of the spirit. When you keep saying things over and over again, it's time to speak good stuff.
That's true.
And so it takes some time, but then you'll eventually get it. Okay.
So staying on topic, another way we can kind of teach this tip to you is we actually call it stacking. Don't stack with your spouse when you're communicating to them. So for instance, you came to them with one issue, you laid it out on the floor.
Mhm.
Don't bring up another issue on top of that, and then another issue on top of that. Even if they're closely related, right? Still don't just keep stacking. And that we call that stacking.
Yeah.
And when you stack up, it's hard to get to the root of the issue of what you originally brought up.
So, as a married couple, do you want to see what you really look like when you do that? Those of us who are married that have children, when you are telling your children and giving them and you putting your foot down about where they can't go or something that they can't do, when your child comes back to you and starts putting on layers, well, such and such goes, well, their parents let them do this, well, and they bring stacking all that stuff. That's how we as a married couple look when we stack stuff.
That's right.
It's the same thing going on. And the same way you sit there and look at your children, then you need to look at yourself. I'm not saying look at your spouse. Look at yourself. When you are in a conversation with your spouse and you all are trying to get direction on an issue, make sure you stand strong in your position in the conversation. We can't say that enough.
That's right.
And you have to make sure that you are readily able to be the listener when listening and then to be the speaker when speaking.
That's good. Very good. Very good. And finally, we just want to share with you all that you are one team. Yeah. One team, one dream. If you always go in your conversations understanding that we are a unit, we are together. Billy wants the best for me. Yolanda, I want the best for him. So that way we can have that perspective when we're having those hard conversations. Yeah. And that way it doesn't feel like a competition. Right. A lot of times when you get in conversations, you start thinking like the words that you say, your nonverbal and your actions start to think like you on two different teams. Yeah. The Bible teaches us don't keep a record of wrongdoings. You're not keeping score. This isn't about winning. It's about understanding and loving your spouse when you communicate.
Amen.
We hope this conversation today on deflecting will help you the next time you have a conversation with your spouse. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Until then, live in peace.